Everybody. Welcome to the fourth installment of Higher Awards Speaker Series. And before chatting with our amazing speaker today, we just wanted to briefly introduce Higher Awards and the people participating in the installment of our series. Just to start it off, Higher Awards is a startup based in Silicon Valley that gives community-focused organizations the ability to provide members with a credit card branded with the organization's logo. Essentially, each time members use the card, they support the organization financially. My name is Srijoni Sengupta. I just go by Shri, and I'm a business intern for Higher Awards.
My name is Mihir Nair, and I am also a business intern for Higher Awards this summer. Along with Shri, we will be co-hosts for this conversation. Finally, we would like to extend a warm welcome to our guest speaker today, Kamran Hussain. Mr. Hussain is the president of the Muslim Community Center of Chicago, one of the oldest and biggest mosques in Chicago. He is an optometrist by profession, and he lives with his wife and 3 children in the northern suburbs of Chicago.
Perfect.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Hussain. We really appreciate it. And just to add on, please feel free to add questions to the Zoom chat or send in questions on our Instagram and Facebook as well, as we will be having a Q&A session towards the end. Perfect. And just first of all, welcome, Mr. Hussain. Thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it. And just to start it off, can you please tell us a little bit more about your story and the inspiration for the work of MCC?
Yeah, so we are a mosque first and foremost, a place where people go and pray, but we're a little bit more than that. We're also a community center, so we offer a lot of services. We have a full-time school that teaches regular education as well as religious education. We have weekend schools, Saturday and Sunday schools, but we also have interfaith events. We also have, we give, zakat is a pillar of Islam where you give 2.5% of your charity to those in need. And we have a service that collects it and as well as distributes it. We give charity to other organizations that are in need. But we also offer different services to our community. We have a senior center, we have a youth center, and so, we have a gym in one of our facilities. So it's an open gym, but also rentals that people can come and do exercise with. We have a funeral service for the people that pass away. We have marriage services. So it's kind of like an all-in-one. It's just not a place for prayer, but it's a whole community center. We have 3 buildings, one in the north side of Chicago. We also have 2 in the suburbs. One is a mosque in the suburbs, but also we have a 3rd building that's a school, a full-time school.
Amazing. Yeah, so it's so great to hear about the wide variety of programs and centers offered by MCC Chicago. And one of the things that you mentioned was the zakat. So here at Higher Awards, we strive to financially empower religious organizations such as MCC Chicago by offering a credit card that offers 2% cash back to these religious organizations. So you mentioned your zakat, and just on the topic of funding and fundraising and budgeting, can you discuss potentially the last time you faced a funding challenge with MCC Chicago, as well as how you overcame that funding challenge?
Yeah, so in general, we don't have a huge funding problem, but we're also a community that raises all of our money comes essentially from the community. So when we need to buy a building, we raise money from the community to help pay for it. So we don't go through government grants or anything like that, which we have actually in recent. We can talk about that a little bit more, but just in general, historically over our 50 years, whenever we needed some type of funding, we would go to the community itself. We never got any foreign funding from outside sources or anything like that. So I've only been president for 2 years, and obviously that this whole last 2-3 months, because of COVID-19, our buildings were closed. And so we ran into a little crisis, because every Friday when we'd have our Friday prayers, people would drop money in the donation box, and you'd rely on maybe about $20,000 a month for donations, whether it be for charity or for expenses of our buildings. During the month of Ramadan, which was our buildings were all closed, we can raise up to $200,000 to $300,000, and that would carry us through the whole year. So that was a big challenge that we had in the last few months, and we're still kind of going through it. We're kind of slowly but surely opening up, but we're not at full capacity. So we are still going to be struggling for the next couple of months. But we've done virtual fundraising during the month of Ramadan. We've raised some money that way, but it's not the same as it was, as it historically has been.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Actually, that was going to be like the question I was going to ask you about. As like the current president of MCC, like especially with like everything going on at the moment, how is MCC working to foster community spirit and like uplift the community during these challenging times? Because as you mentioned, like all of the buildings have been closed,
Yeah.
and like is there like any like virtual events, or like how is like the community spirit being upheld at the moment?
Yeah, so Zoom, obviously we're on Zoom right now, but Zoom is kind of like the way we communicated with our community for the last, since March 15th. So we kind of upped our programming in that sense. We had our religious leader, our imam, do a lot of lectures, but we also had a lot of different types of lectures. We had like, just community events, a cooking series. So people in our community made a dish and they videotaped it and put it on Zoom. We had interfaith lectures from different faith groups that came and spoke during the month of Ramadan, just on different topics that we would kind of suggest to them. But it was mostly through our through Zoom and virtual meetings that we would have lectures and talks. Really, mostly nothing too deep, but more so kind of uplifting our spirits, because we're not in the mosque or we're not getting together, socializing with each other. So a lot of the talks were just kind of uplifting your spirits, saying that things are going to be okay, just making sure everyone is okay. Our staff also did wellness calls to our community members, especially our elders. And we also set up a grocery service run when Chicago was really on lockdown. We had a lot of our youth in our community that would go get groceries and deliver them to some of our elders in our community that didn't have the capability of going out. So we did definitely up the game in that. During Ramadan, we had a service for people that break their fast that didn't have access to restaurants. They would come to our mosque usually to eat and break their fast together. But those that couldn't afford it, we had a service where we served about 600 meals to people in need during the month.
Amazing. It's great to see that, such a local community focused organization such as MCC is having an impact with those 600 meals, and specifically with your outreach, which is where I want to turn next. So your outreach has been in the thousands. You've had over 3,000 members at services. You've had a lot of engagement in the local communities across the Chicagoland area. So could you speak more to how this outreach has really inspired you, and potentially share an uplifting moment or story of someone you've encountered through your work with MCC Chicago?
Yeah, so we have a pretty vibrant outreach. We have two outreach groups. One is called Interfaith and Outreach. Sorry, my son is doing some stuff. Sorry about that. Sorry, I lost track. So we have an outreach group that does a lot of interfaith and outreach work with the community. We have a great relationship with the police, local governments, and fire departments in our community. And we also have this zakat group that not only are we helping give out charity to community members, but we also have we're starting to work on ESL programs, as well as job placement programs. So we are working with the outside community for those things. Just recently, because of the whole killing of George Floyd, a few weeks ago, we have started to do a little bit more outreach with the African American community. There's a lot of African American Muslims actually as well in the country, and because Chicago is very divided and segregated, we are outreaching with that community as well, the African American Muslim community, in terms of just partnering up and seeing how we can help them and how they can help us.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's so inspiring and unique that your organization and like MCC is also working to like empower not just like the Muslim community, but like the Chicago community as a whole. And I think that that's something that like all of us definitely have something to like learn from and take away from. Um, yeah, and as I was reading your website, I was just coming across like one of the great initiatives of MCC is the work that the interfaith as well as like the intra-faith health screening programs that they have, such as like, as you mentioned, like outreach, counseling, as well as like financial assistance. And I think you touched upon this like before about how like MCC is working with like within like COVID-19 to like empower and support the elderly community with like grocery store runs. Would you mind like telling us a little bit more about how MCC works with these like various programs for like counseling and like financial assistance for like new converts to just dedicate like themselves to like the local community as a whole and empower those who are like in need?
So first, like with counseling, we don't have the bandwidth to actually do real counseling, but we have a couple of community members that are certified counselors, that they're the first line of defense, I guess, if someone calls and has a issue, whether it be marriage, family, whatever, any type of problem, they reach to our counselors. But we don't have the bandwidth to kind of take care of all those problems. Some people reach to our imams or religious leaders, but they're not necessarily trained in dealing with a lot of problems that require professional help. But we do have access to actual organizations and actual therapists that we refer people out to. In terms of our grocery runs, that was kind of on the spur of the moment. When COVID hit, the most vulnerable were the elderly. And the most vulnerable were elderly that had, an underlying condition. So we decided, a lot of them had family and friends and kids that were there that could help them, but a lot of them don't, and a lot of them are living alone, or a lot of them are living with their wives, and they just didn't want to go out. And it was pretty scary in the beginning, right, in March and April. And so we decided, hey, you know what, this would be a good community service that we could do for the elderly. They weren't necessarily people in need, but they didn't have access to go and do grocery runs. So it's not like we paid for their groceries, but it was just a service that we provided for them. Now, serving dinners and stuff like that, yeah, that was something that the MCC provided and the community chipped in to help pay for those meals. But those were all services that could only be done by the volunteer, because we had volunteers that were willing to step up and help out. There was one more question that you asked in terms of outreach. What we have done recently also is applied for certain grants, government grants that help with community services. And so we were able to kind of help secure that, so we can go do a lot of these community service programs. So we have a couple coming up in July and August, and one with Habitat for Humanity in August as well, to kind of help with their projects.
That's amazing. I think something that's definitely resonated with me with all of your responses so far has been, you talking about the community. I can see it's something that drives you and drives the work of MCC Chicago. So just on that note, discussing uplifting and empowering local communities, especially within, Chicago, which is a huge city with millions of people. Muslim Community Center in Chicago is empowering local communities. And, you also mentioned that giving is really integral to how your organization operates, with the Zakat. So, on this note, could you talk more about how potentially higher rewards, where we, offer the chance to empower and uplift local communities, how we, with our credit card, which gives 2% cash back to organizations such as yours, how we could potentially help to potentially alleviate some funding issues. Because, you mentioned like you're applying for a series of grants, and as we all know in the nonprofit world, in the religious world, it can be hard to fund programs for thousands of people. So can you talk more about how potentially higher rewards can help?
Yeah. So one of the things that we've kind of focused in on is for our first 49, 50 years, we've been kind of just kind of, we would raise our funds through donations, whether it be, not necessarily begging, but, on Friday prayers or during the month of Ramadan when we would have 1,000 people in our mosque, you'd go and physically ask them for money, and they'd write checks, and people would get excited, and they would write checks, and we realized, yeah, we can. That's always important to do because that's a way you can raise money, but you're not creating any type of self-sufficiency with your community or with your mosque. So if anything happens, such as COVID, obviously we raised some money during COVID, but we also realized that there's a lot of people in our community that have lost jobs. They don't have the finances that they had the year before to donate. So if I was ready to earmark $500 for the MCC this year and I don't have a job, or there's a fear of me losing my job next month or next year, then I'm not going to donate that because I need it for my family. So we realized that, yeah, of course the community will always give to some extent, but you also have to create some type of self-sufficiency because you can't rely 100% on charitable givings. So, in the last year, number one is we opened up an endowment. It's very small, but we did open up an endowment, hoping that in years to come, in 50 years or 100 years, that endowment can help sustain some of our expenses that we spend money on every year. But we also we started being a little bit more upfront about applying for grants. There are grants out there that can help with certain things that we need help in. But funny that you mentioned when I got to know about your program and your company. Amazon.com has a Smile Awards where if you spend on Amazon with your account, you can give 2% or whatever percent to any charitable organization that signs up with Amazon. That's something called Amazon Smile. So just reading about your program, just very briefly, this would be kind of actually interesting to maybe pursue in the future, in the sense that if you can get everybody to, I know everybody has reasons for signing up for certain credit cards, right? So whether it be mileage or points or cashback with Discover or whatever, this would be kind of a cool opportunity in terms of getting like mass people to sign up for this credit card, just because they know that 2% is going, it may not go back to them, but they know 2% is going back to an organization they care about. So, you add that up, 2% can be it can be donations that you would never really have thought about, never really have asked. And it can be kind of like recurrent, that you can expect that every year. And that would only work, I think, if you do some type of mass, obviously if I can sign up and a few other people can sign up, but it would be really, really well done if you can kind of get like a mass group of people to sign up. And we have membership drives and stuff like that, but that would be kind of like an incentive to sign up for that credit card, because that 2% is going back to the community. So the more you spend, the more it goes back.
Amazing. Yeah. And just on a final note for this conversation before we head into the question and answer session, I just want to thank you so much for joining us again. I think that you kind of hit it on the nose about what we're all about, and how we're trying to work together here to basically create and empower communities, because the stories are what matter here. And through a financial service such as Higher Rewards, you mentioned the word self-sufficiency and also the word sustainable, and I think that's what we're about here, is about that 2% margin. Amazon Smile has 0.5%, and we're offering 2%. So automatically that impact just it has no limits. And it really, like you said, even though you may not directly feel the impact as someone who's a part of MCC or any other nonprofit or religious organization, that impact will be there because it's
For
funding
sure.
initiatives.
For
Yeah.
sure.
So once again, thank you. And now we're going to head into the Q&A
Cool.
section of this. So I would ask that if you want to ask your question, please come on live to ask Mr. Hussain directly. So we'll use the raise hand function in Zoom for that. Any questions? All right, so we have one from Cindy G.
Hi, Mr. Hussain. Again, thank you so much for coming on and sharing more about your organization. I actually want to ask about the Muslim community. I read in a recent research article that Muslims are the fastest growing religious group in the world right now, which is so incredible. And I believe that only reinforces the importance of us growing in appreciation and understanding of your group. And so I'm wondering, from your perspective, what actions can we take to better understand and support the Muslim community?
Probably, I think the best thing to do is kind of understand what we believe in, as opposed to what you might see on the news or what kind of perception you might have based on third-party sources or whatever. I think also you should realize that we're not a monolithic group, so we're not a race. I know that sometimes gets kind of makes people confused, but it's funny because the image that you have of Muslims in America might be one thing, but the truth of the matter is that the African Americans make up most of the Muslims in America, actually. But that's probably not the perception that a lot of people have. They might think that they're Middle Eastern. They might think that they're from India or Pakistan, from the Southeast Asian continent. There's a lot of Muslims in China, which has been making the news recently. But there's Muslims in Malaysia. Indonesia, I believe, is a predominantly Muslim country. So in Africa, there's a lot of Muslims. So we're not a monolithic group. We also are different people that come from different cultures. So, even though we may have very similar beliefs, our cultural practices are very different. So I think that the first thing to do is actually learn what the tenets of the religion are, which is actually, if you really study it, there's a lot of very similarities to Christianity and Judaism because they come from the same branch of religion, Abrahamic faiths. But there are differences, obviously, and that's where I think it's important for people to learn about what it actually means to be a Muslim, and then realize that it's not beholden to any type of culture or race or anything like that, because that's the most important thing. So MCC, our organization, is probably one of the most diverse mosques in the city of Chicago because the location that we're located at is very diverse. So we have a lot of people from the Southeast subcontinent, but also from the Middle East. We don't have as many African Americans as there are in the city of Chicago just because of our location, but we also have many Latino Muslims who are converting en masse, over the years. So I think it's just more about learning about the actual religion as opposed to kind of the perception that you might get just by watching the news or hearing it from other people.
Awesome, thank you.
And now it seems like we have another question from Jacob Kip.
Oh, am I there? Okay. Hello.
Hi.
My question for you is just, have you noticed that people are kind of coming together more now during this pandemic? And aside from, what we are always seeing on the news and stuff, I'm really desperate and always looking for, messages of hope. during this time where just we see a lot of bad news. So
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's weird because, you know, in America, in the United States, the reason why we're all here to some extent, even though it may not necessarily show up in reality, but there's all the idea of America is always hope, right? So you're always hoping for something better. You're always dreaming for something better. You know, a lot of the reasons why our parents that migrated from America, whether we were first generation or second generation, or have been here for hundreds of years, is that you came here for something better. Unless you're unless your ancestors of slaves, right? So we always try to look at obviously there's a lot of negativity going on, but we always try to look at the positive. So even when this pandemic hit in March and we had to close our mosque down, and a lot of people were wondering what was going on, you know, our religious leaders did a really good job of explaining that, especially in our religion, there's a lot of concessions that you can make and continue to practice and be, you know, religious. So for example, even when there's no pandemic going on, if you're sick, you don't fast in the month of Ramadan. If you are traveling, you don't have to fast. You know, if you're traveling, you can shorten your prayers. Women that are on their menstrual cycle don't have to fast, you know, because they're going through changes that, you know, may not be conducive to not eating for, you know, 12 hours. So now that our mosque is closed, you don't have to pray in the mosque to be God conscious or religious. You can pray at home. Many people pray at home anyway, but so there's always concessions that are made. So that kind of helped calm our community down. I think that also not being around each other, whether you're Muslim or not Muslim, or around your friends and your colleagues at work, or your Muslim brothers and sisters that you see every Friday for Friday prayer, not seeing them for 2.5 months. I think that hopefully once things go back to normal, that, you know, we appreciate these things a little bit more, and you realize, you know, what you don't, you know, you realize what you lost until it's gone, right? So, you know, definitely, it's something that, you know, I think that people are kind of appreciating a lot of these things a little bit more. But, you know, I think that there's some benefits. Can you hear me?
yeah,
Yeah, sorry about that. So there's some benefits too. I mean, we got to stay home. I wasn't working for about 2 months. So, you know, I got to spend a lot more time with my family, you know, and you realize that hopefully you'll never have to go through this thing again, ever. So, you know, but you appreciate that time that you had that you probably will never have again in your life.
yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
Amazing. Well, thank you all for tuning in today to our conversation. We hope that Mr. Hussein's story and MCC Chicago's values, mission, and vision really inspire you. We encourage everyone to continue supporting their local communities, no matter where you are, and, you know, to uplift those who are countlessly dedicating themselves to others, such as Mr. Hussain and MCC Chicago. We appreciate you for tuning in today and asking insightful questions to our guest speaker. You can follow MCC Chicago and their work at www.mccchicago.org. Finally, a little plug about us. Higher Awards is all about sharing stories and empowering local communities and individuals who are dedicating themselves to others. If you wish to learn more about Higher Awards, visit www.higherawards.com. We are sending each of you love, health, and happiness during these difficult times, and we hope you all have a nice night. Thank you.
Thank you.